We are live. You can start when you want.
I'll wait till 7. It is 7. All right, let's call this meeting to order. It is the June 15th, 2020 regular meeting of the City of Prospect, Kentucky City Council, and all 6 members of the council are present. 1 by WebEx, 5 in person. The city attorney is present, and obviously I'm present. The first order of business on the agenda is the approval of 3 sets of minutes. The regular meeting on February 17th, a special meeting on May 29th, and a special meeting on June the 10th, all 2020. Those minutes have been distributed among the members of the council. Are there any additions or corrections anyone wants to suggest?
I move approval of the minutes.
A second.
Randy, are you referring to all 3?
Yes.
No, because I need to abstain on the one that I was not present at. So we have to vote on them separately.
Which minutes do you want to move?
The special meeting on the 29th of May.
Okay, I move approval of the February 17th and the June 10th minutes.
Second.
All right, any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Those minutes are approved.
I approve them.
Leaving the minutes of what, the 29th?
May 29th. I move approval of the minutes for May 29th.
I'll second it.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
With 1 abstention.
They are approved, all 3. Next part is new business. No, I beg your pardon. We said we would take the comments from citizens before we got into the other business of all the ordinances. So who would like to speak? What citizen would like to speak at this time? Don Grader.
Very quickly, let me emphasize at first, technically I'm speaking for myself as a resident about this ordinance, but we only learned of it. I am one of our 4 HOA directors and the vice president, but we haven't been able to. Our president has been unavailable, so the other 3 have connected by email. I believe I'm speaking for everybody, but that's not formal. So I'm just speaking technically for myself.
Don, which HOA?
Innisbrook.
Thank you.
I like the new ordinance in the sense that it brings some practical pressure to bear to the appropriate parties to care for the fences. Because we have, Innisbrook is bounded on each side by what's defined as a boundary fence in the new provisions. But so it would help us a lot if somebody said, because on one side we're hearing, well, it's not my fence, but it's not ours either, at least in part. On the other side, we're hearing, we don't care whose it is, we're not going to do anything to it. So that would help a lot. So I like the intent of the ordinance, but we have a lot of issues that have never been sorted through about exactly who owns these 2 fences. And it's not, the answer is not going to be the same for all sections of it. For example, there's a long on the Henry Wallace Nature Preserve side of Sutherland Farm Road. There's a lengthy stretch of 4-board fence that's outside Innisbrook. It's between the entrance to Innisbrook and 42. Well, that can't belong to anyone, I don't think, but the Wallace people, but they're saying they won't maintain it. But it matters a lot to our residents because we ride past it. Everybody rides past it at least twice a day. So we do care what it looks like, but it's not ours. On the other side, with what is now the Breakers property, we have a common fence. But again, it's not, we're at this point, we've got council working on trying to help us determine A, who has responsibility for it, but B, they're also, we don't know who put it there, or there's a lot that has to be clarified, and we want it to be maintained. And we're a small development, just a little over 60 homeowners. So if we had to do all that, the cost would probably be prohibitive. But it does matter very much. We just want to get it sorted out clearly as to who has responsibility. But that's going to take a while. So if that would be passed effective immediately with these heavy fines, and it should prove 3 or 4 months from now that part of it was ours, that would, it could really be draconian. So what we'd like to see is, what I would like to see is something, an ordinance with that purpose, with some notice and curative time and notice to people, a chance to get it fixed and all that, bearing in mind that you can't just get a fence company out the same afternoon you decide that it needs to be repaired. It takes a while because there aren't that many of them and they're busy. So I don't know what all the appropriate details are, but we support the idea. I support the idea, but we have we have to sort through before we even know what our responsibility might be. And I would just hope that would be taken into account in whatever the form is, if it passes. The other is regarding this requested waiver coming from the breakers developer to operate heavy equipment on Saturdays. Well, generally, as someone who backs up to it, those things are awfully noisy. And now that the weather's conducive to getting out on your back porch and all that sort of thing, I wouldn't want it. From our back porch, you can't have a normal conversation if you have some of the louder pieces of equipment or the beeps going off if they're back, all that. Now, I would like to know, is the project estimated to be completed sooner? If they can do that, and if so, how much? That might change my opinion, but I don't know enough on that.
Well, Don, on that point, I'm not aware that we have received a request to do anything.
Okay, well,
I'm not saying we won't, but we haven't, as far as I know.
that's good. I've had 4 people email me and call me telling me that it was on the table. So I'll save my comments till the appropriate time. Anyway, thank you all, that I'll get off here and shut up. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks, Don.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you.
You have something?
No, I'm good.
Anyone else want to address the council? Any citizen comment?
Steve has his hand up, John. I don't know if you can see him.
No, I don't.
Okay, Steve Stowers is at the podium now, if you can't see him.
Go ahead, Andy.
Okay.
Honorable Mayor, City Council members, both here and electronically, and Mr. Gorman, Chief. Thanks. My name is Steve Stowers. Reside at 7001 Wyndham Parkway in Sutherland. And I'm going to be very brief because I see in your packet on the very last page, it's front and back printing, are my comments, and then a resolution from our neighbors in Sutherland. We're a neighborhood, as you're aware, of 300 homes, and like Innisbrook, actually, we probably have more homes that are adjacent to the breakers development that's in process even than they do. If you recall, at the December meeting, the developer came and asked for and was granted a waiver to operate heavy equipment on Saturdays during a week where there was inclement weather, and it caused them to lose a day. I'm sorry. And that had an expiration date on it of April 3rd. Unfortunately, as this project is continued, there's been a lot of instances, and we've provided some of this information to Mike Lesh, code enforcement, and some to you all as well as members of council, and also the mayor. Numerous violations where the equipment was being operated before 8 a.m., after 5 p.m. The variance also said the hours were 9 to 5, not 8 to 5. And we've got timestamp videos of those as well, working on Saturday, before 9. I'm not going to beat that to death, but the point of it is our concern, and I'm speaking for Sutherland and our entire board, as well as the vast majority of our residents. Our concern is that if the developer does ask, we just would really want to have an opportunity to be included in any of those, excuse me, any of those discussions, because you know, it's just you know, during the winter it's one thing, but now a lot of people are getting out. People have been cooped up. People are wearing masks, and we know the whole drill here. It really is nice to have an opportunity to have a nice, quiet Saturday and Sunday, sitting on your deck or your screened-in porch, and not have to worry about the next second is going to be a beep, beep, beep. I've kind of got it memorized in my brain now. You know, I just want to ask again that if this request did come up, we as the residents of Sutherland and our HOA board would like to have an opportunity to have some input there. And I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any other citizen comment?
John-
John Clark's coming up to the podium right now.
John Clark, 6823 Wyndham Parkway, Prospect, Kentucky, 40059. Our comments have been, will be added to the record that Steve and I collaborated on. Don Grader touched on it earlier that many people are working from home at this point, and they have to put up with the large trucks, heavy equipment, and the backup alarms Monday through Friday. And the ordinance, as it stands, prohibits the use of heavy equipment on Saturday and Sunday, which we think is appropriate. That it's there for a purpose, so that people can enjoy their weekends, and if developers should work Monday through Friday and stay in compliance with the ordinance. So we would respectfully request that the council adhere to the code of ordinances as written and not grant any waivers, variances, or amendments in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, John. Any other comments from citizens? Anyone else want to speak? All right, I guess not. So, hearing no more, let's move into new business. We have,
Can we rearrange this agenda so that in the event that some people have to leave, that we can get this stuff done quickly, that is reasonable to do so before we move into the lengthier stuff?
how would you like to rearrange it, Frank?
Well, I think there are three that the mill rate ordinance, the adopt the supplement of the code of ordinances, and there's one more.
The mayor and the council,
Yeah, but those would be secondary.
secondary, okay, but yeah.
The tax rate,
The tax rate, the kind of the pro forma of the minutes and those type of things with the publisher. And I have a question of Chris. Why is it necessary that we enact an ordinance when we've told the people in Metro of our waiver of the waiver of the sidewalk request?
So we're talking about 594, is that
I know
correct?
the answer to that. Julia Williams of the Planning Commission has told us that they need an ordinance. I asked, could we do it by resolution or by municipal order? And her answer was, no, we had to do it by ordinance. So there you are.
Well, but she calls it a waiver ordinance. I mean, the verbiage is inappropriate in her thing. And it would appear that what she needs is something where we've taken a firm vote, which we did in
February.
In February. We could certify the minutes with that vote to her. Laura's a notary, and that would be appropriate. We can take another vote and certify it from this meeting if we'd like to. But it really should be a variance. It's really not an ordinance.
I have no problem with that at all. I have no problem with that at all. You can do it either way that you suggested, Sandra.
What's the rest of the council want to do?
I think.
Let's take another vote.
Well,
Can we just take another vote tonight?
Yeah, do you want to make a motion
Approve
at
the
some
variance.
time?
I'm sorry, Frank, what?
I said, do you want to make a motion?
I would be happy to, if that's okay. I think, I like what Sandra said, so I make a motion that, we take a second vote tonight, approving the variance then, to the, okay, help me out.
Let's, you know what, you're fine. I just think we should indicate that it is a variance, not an ordinance. And so your motion should be a vote on a variance.
Okay, I thought I said that, but that's what yes, that's right.
Okay.
So, I move that, we vote on a variance, to the, let's see what this is called. This is called the Hunting Creek Drive, the frontage along US 42, as described there in front of us on 5/94/2020.
Second?
So the motion is to grant a variance for a sidewalk waiver to the frontages along US 42, Covered Bridge Road and Hunting Creek Drive for the Hunting Creek subdivision. Is that right?
No, for the Hunting Green subdivision.
I'm sorry, Hunting Green subdivision.
Thank you.
Yeah, and actually, I like the way Randy said it better, so if we can use that verbiage, that's fine with me.
Second.
Laura, did you get that down?
I got it, but my understanding is they need something in writing. So really what this is going to give us is a second set of minutes.
Well, can't I just give them something in writing certifying those minutes?
Well, apparently they want it certified.
Right, and they already got a letter with your signature on it, but that was supposed to be a placeholder until they got something more official.
Well, this is, I mean, the council, this is a motion. We're voting on the motion.
Right, but that's what we had in February, which the minutes you just approved included. But according to Metro Planning, that's insufficient.
Well, it appears according to her letter that she's confusing ordinances with waivers. She apparently thinks they are the same thing, and an ordinance is not a waiver. A waiver is not an ordinance.
And
What
variance is actually the correct word.
Right, what they want is a variance, which we have voted to give them, but we're voting to give them again, since they don't seem to understand that. I just think it sets a poor precedent to have to make this kind of an action, which is nothing more than a variance, into an ordinance, which is a law.
What if you did a municipal order for a variance? What if you did a municipal order for a variance? And then they would have something that you could certify.
Could we could do that, and it could be its own separate document. Is that what you're thinking?
Exactly.
Okay.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
Wouldn't
I'll
the
go for that.
resolution also be a separate document?
Yeah, but the municipal order is stronger than the resolution.
Yeah, okay.
I think the municipal order is a reasonable workaround.
I do too.
I'd support that.
I guess, Greg, you need to withdraw your motion.
So Don, I withdraw my motion. Thank you.
And then we need to.
Well, actually, his motion is fine. It's just his motion would be enacted by a municipal order. Or Randy's motion, whose ever motion it was.
Yeah.
Okay, let's redo it all over again. I think I understand. So let me withdraw the earlier motion. And let me make a new motion, and Randy, help me out with this. You're better at this than I. So I move that we authorize a municipal order to grant a variance for a sidewalk for the frontage along US 42, Covered Bridge Road and Hunting Creek Drive for the Hunting Green subdivision.
Get it,
I think
Sandra?
that's,
I think that
I
covers
thought that
everything.
sounded terrific. Thank you.
Yeah, that's got it.
Yeah, I would substitute the word enact for authorize.
Okay, good point, John. Enact instead of authorize. And mention in there granting a sidewalk waiver. It's a variance for a sidewalk waiver.
Correct.
Make sure we get the word waiver in there also.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, that's done.
May I interrupt for a moment? Can we do roll call voting, please, just to make things clear?
Sure.
Mr. Hulsman,
aye.
Mrs. Leonard,
Aye.
Mr. Shu,
Aye.
Mr. Fulcher,
Aye.
Mr. Gibson.
Aye.
Is that it?
Randy Swan, aye. Me.
How could I forget Randy Swan? All right, so it's passed unanimously. Now, Frank, what were the others? Was the Code of
Let's do the supplement to the
Ordinances,
code of ordinance.
ordinance.
But yeah, the supplement,
Yeah, and there was another one I didn't catch.
595.
Yeah, let's do that next.
All right.
I moved,
Reading. Does someone want to discuss?
I moved to bring it to the floor for a first reading.
Okay.
Ordinance 595.
Second,
Second, all in favor?
aye.
Okay, it's on the floor for a first reading. Would someone like to give that a first reading?
You want to read it, Frank, or?
Sure. City of Prospect, Kentucky, ordinance number 595, series 2020. An ordinance enacting and adopting the 2019 supplement to the Code of Ordinances of the City of Prospect.
I second.
That's done. Frank, there were three ordinances that you wanted put up front. and
The third one was the
That's two of them.
mill rate.
What's
I
that
thought we were
one?
going to do the mayor and the council.
No, mill rate first. That's going to be important.
You know what, right?
The tax rate, the ad valorem.
Oh, yeah, good. That's
The-
593.
I move that we bring ordinance number 593 to the floor for a first reading.
Second? All in
Second.
favor?
Wait a minute.
All right, so it's on the floor for a first reading. Any discussion? If not, I'll ask.
John, in discussion here, I think Chris needs to review this, because the form doesn't comply with the way, ordinances or amendments to ordinances need to be, constructed. In other words, we have to have some deletions and brackets, and this doesn't do that. Now, I don't know that it changes the substance, but the form is very rigid in the law. So Chris,
Actually, we agree, Randy and I talked about this today also. We agree with Frank that the format is not correct. However, we can make non-substantive changes to comply with the format and still go ahead with a first reading. Now, I do want to caution my other council members, if we go ahead with this before we enact the budget, we are held to these dollars. We have no opportunity to change it later if we need more money. So as long as everybody is aware of that, we can go ahead. Randy, you wanted to propose the changes?
Yes, where it says an ordinance establishing an ad valorem tax rate, I would rather that say an ordinance delaying by 2 months.
No, maintaining.
I'm sorry, an ordinance maintaining by 2 months because of the COVID-19, an ad valorem tax rate for the city of Prospect, and delaying the real property tax collection schedule for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2020 and ending June 30, 2021.
Because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Because we want our future records to show why this delay occurred was not anything that Prospect enacted. It was something beyond our control.
And I also, the reason I want to say instead of an ordinance establishing and say an ordinance maintaining an ad valorem tax rate is, I'm assuming at this time, we hope to keep it the same and not increase it. And I think that's the thing that most of our citizens want to know most of all. We're talking about a tax rate, is it going up or not? If it's not, then I think saying an ordinance maintaining is more clear to them as to what we are proposing.
The other place is in section 2, where, because Frank's right, it says the city code of the city of Prospect is amended as follows. We're not really amending it. We're really indicating under the current circumstances that we are delaying it. It's not, it's the only way it's changing is by the delay.
It's still, you still need the original wording to be deleted.
Actually, this adds wording,
I know, but we still need,
which is underlined.
I know, the ad, but we don't have the deletions in here.
But you don't have the bracket with what you've taken out in prior.
Yeah, the only word is the word amended. The word amended should be bracketed and lined through, and in the word
No,
delayed.
that whole paragraph doesn't conform to the format required by the law. I mean,
You're worrying about the dates also?
no, but the dates are new. All of the substance there is okay. I'm talking about
The format.
Talking about the legal format.
I agree.
Are you talking about the whereases or what are you talking
No,
about?
section 2 does not conform to the line throughs, brackets. The underlines are in great part okay. In other words, the format is the problem, not the substance.
Okay, I'll be glad to review it. That's the first time I've seen it, but I'll be glad to review it. But I would suggest, as Sandra said, we can go ahead and give it the first reading and change anything that's not substantive later on, substantive later on.
Okay, I have a question. By what date must we adopt the ad valorem tax schedule and amount? And the reason I ask that is I'm not far enough along, at least with the budget at this point, to be totally comfortable to say that we wouldn't need some kind of an increase. I'm certainly not lobbying for it, but my numbers are not at the point yet where I'm totally comfortable we can do what we need to within the same tax rate that we've had. By when, what is our date now, since they've delayed and moved everything downstream, by when must we adopt this?
Laura knows the answer to that.
The end of July at the absolute latest.
Okay, so we would have time at the July meeting to do a first reading, and then we could have another special meeting if we needed to before the end of the month to set the tax rate. That would work.
Well, if the end of July is the deadline, then you would need to have a special meeting. And if you give it a first reading tonight and then change it in between now and the second reading, you would need to do a special meeting for that purpose.
Well, John, if I'm not mistaken, this is your recommendation or your request for a budget. This revenue comes from you, right? That maintains this.
This is not the budget ordinance, of course. This is our recommendation for setting a tax. Because this is half of our revenue right here. We got to make sure we get it done in time.
Yeah, but my concern, and I understand that, and I certainly want to do that. my concern is because we're not, I can't speak for the others, but I'm not far enough along myself yet that I'm totally comfortable that the current tax rate's gonna cover exactly what we need. So if we do a first reading tonight, and then we crunch all the other numbers and decide we need a little more, then are we locked in because we've had a first reading?
No, you can have, we don't have to do a second reading. We can do another first reading of a different ordinance.
Right.
That's right. That's
That's
right.
exactly right.
Okay, okay, that's my question and my answer. Thank you, guys.
So why not pass it tonight have the first reading tonight, and then if you do not change it, you're in a position where you can go ahead at the next meeting and pass it. If you do need to change the rate, then you can look at that problem at a later time. You probably have to have a special.
That works for me. I just don't want us to get locked into something before we're ready to.
I like it.
Okay,
Okay.
would someone like to give it a first reading?
Randy, why don't you do that? 'Cause you've got the.
Okay. And City of Prospect Ordinance number 593, Series 2020. An ordinance maintaining an ad valorem tax rate for the City of Prospect and delaying by 2 months because of COVID-19 the real property tax collection schedule for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2020 and ending June 30, 2021.
All right. Thank you, Randy.
That was good.
Do we need a second for that?
Second.
Second.
We don't need a second.
We don't
for
need to
first
vote
We
reading,
don't, okay.
because you're not passing anything.
Oh, okay.
All right. Frank, do you want to take these other ordinances in some particular order?
Can we go ahead and get the council and the mayor out of the way?
How about an easy one, the 592, the ordinance establishing a budget for the municipal road agency.
Let's do
No,
that.
we're not ready for that at all. We have lots of questions in regard to that.
I have a lot of questions about
Okay.
the road fund.
What about 589 and 590?
Yeah, we could go ahead and wipe those out quickly.
I don't,
You have any objections, Frank?
I do, at 591, we're not anywhere near an ordinance for the budget.
No, I'm saying 589 and 590, the one on the mayor and the council.
So that's fine with me.
Okay, yeah, we can do 589 and 590, the one on the mayor and the council.
Do I hear a motion to bring 589 on the floor?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, it's on the floor. Would someone like to read it?
First reading of ordinance
Well,
5.
I have a discussion item here, John. Which one is it?
589.
589.
589.
I'd like to just make a comment. Well, the substance of this, I agree with wholeheartedly. I'm concerned about the form. Now, going through my papers, it looks like the city attorney is supposed to be writing these things, and they're supposed to be written in accordance with our code of ordinances, which have a chapter on general construction. And my understanding of how this is supposed to work is the council puts together the substance of an ordinance, and then it goes to the attorney and the clerical staff to put it together consistent with our code of ordinances. Particularly, what I'm concerned about is particularly the construction of the ordinances, because we differ every time we write one of these things.
589.
We all have different writing styles, but they all should
I got it.
in the final analysis, they should all look the same from one ordinance to another. Use the same terminology. So where do we go from here with that? An example, let me just give you an example. The city of Prospect is used. The mayor, the Prospect City Council, and then they use council, and then the city council, and use Prospect City Council. All of those things mean essentially the same thing. In the beginning of our code of ordinances, it says that anywhere the term city is used shall mean the city of Prospect. So in my own naive little way, I see a 4-page ordinance that really should be 3 pages when you take out all the fluff.
Chris, let me respond to that for a minute, and then you're welcome to jump in.
Yeah, go ahead.
When Sandra and I started working on ordinances many months ago, several things became apparent to us. I know they're not big issues with you, but they certainly are with us. When many of these ordinances were first written, we still had City of Louisville Board of Aldermen, and we had Jefferson County and county commissioners. Now we have merged government with the Metro Council. So for some people in Prospect, what we were getting in some feedback is that they were confusing Prospect City Council and Metro Council and not understanding the distinction between those two. So what we've tried to do as we have worked on ordinances is to enumerate the Prospect City Council, the Prospect City Government, the Prospect Council members, as opposed to Metro. In addition, we have also worked to make the verbiage more gender neutral, and also where there might be a cross-reference for an ordinance that would be of interest or of importance to someone who is looking this up, but they may not know there are other areas that may also impact or be related to it. We've tried to make brief citations of those so they would know to go look elsewhere to have a full answer to their questions. So that's why some of these are different in format from what we have done in the past, but we are trying to make them more consistent as we move forward.
That's true. The other thing is when we start a clause, based on what Randy said, we tend to say Prospect Mayor, Prospect City Council. But if the clause has subclauses in it, we don't tend to have picked that up all the way through all the subclauses. The only time that isn't true is when the subclauses themselves are so significant that they're liable to be quoted without the surrounding words. And in that case, we err on putting too much in rather than too little.
This is Greg. I would agree with Randy and Sandra. And with all due respect to Frank, who has a very great knowledge of our ordinances and everything, but someone who doesn't have that kind of knowledge, and I think that's the average citizen, and even the rest of us on the council for the most part, or most of us on the council maybe, unlike the clarity that this verbiage specifies. We know that it means the city of Prospect, not any other city, and since we're kind of closely related, not necessarily directly, but under the geography of Metro, I like the clarity that this verbiage brings to the ordinance. So I like it. I'd rather err on the side of having too many words than somebody saying down the road, well, what does that mean exactly? Here, there's no argument, I don't think.
Frank, if I may weigh in here. So when we talked about it, we talked about it in terms of if a citizen wanted to pull a specific ordinance and just look at that ordinance, could they understand it by just reading that ordinance and nothing else? They wouldn't have to go to the how we define city and this and that. And for better or worse, what Randy and Sandra convinced me, and I totally agree with them. I totally agree with them. It's much more user friendly if you do it the way that they've done it, and that's the way we have it that way. But in the future, if you have issues like that, I really would appreciate it if you call me before the meeting and we can try to work them out. I'll be glad to, be glad to do that, but try to call me in advance if you would, please.
I'd like to, one more thing. These two ordinances were worked on by Harold Shue and Greg Hilsman and myself. But even with the three of us, we talked about the things that Randy and I had found early on.
Well, Chris, one of the things that even at your suggestion in one of the earlier meetings, that problem would have been solved in one little sentence. It says, as used herein, city shall mean the city of Prospect, and councilman or mayor shall mean the mayor of the city of Prospect. And then you didn't need all the other words, and it would still be within the body of the ordinance. But I put it to rest. I'm not gonna worry about it. It's not a hill to die on, and I agree with the substance. I'm just saying, I think that's my preference.
I understand.
I do think one thing Frank has brought up, and I don't think we're anywhere near ready for it, and that is the early ordinance that you're talking about with some of the construction in there. At some point in time, that should be amended too. But I don't think we have begun to come up with all of the things that we would incorporate into that.
So, first reading.
So where are we? Are we ready to have a first reading of this ordinance?
First reading.
Yes. Would you like me to do that?
I would.
City of Prospect Ordinance 589, Series 2020. An ordinance amending and modifying Chapter 3201, 3202, 3203, 3220, 20 and 32.21 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Prospect, allowing for change of regular council meetings by adoption of an annual calendar and clarifying existing clauses.
Okay, thank you. That takes care of that one.
Now, wait a minute. So before you run on, I have one suggestion that I would like as a small edit. This is not substantial. It is for clarity in section 3221 meetings. If you drop down, we talk about the January meeting will be on the second Monday of the month in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King, correct? Then it says whenever the third Monday in January, which is what we've already addressed, falls on a federal legal holiday, that regular meeting shall be held at 7 p.m. on the next succeeding Tuesday, which is not a federal legal holiday. We need to strike in that sentence that starts with whenever the third Monday, strike in January.
I agree. I think it's much more sensible that way.
Yeah, it gives two conflicting messages. One says we're going to meet on the second Monday, and the other one says we're going to meet on a succeeding Tuesday. So take out in January, and that covers us on any other months in which we might have a federal holiday.
All right.
Very good.
I'm off my soapbox now.
You'd revved up and do the next one.
I'll be happy to.
Okay, how about number 590?
You want to do 590 next? That's the mayor's.
Yes.
You want me to read it in, or?
Well, somebody needs to put it on the floor for first reading.
It be brought to the floor for first reading.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
The floor. Go ahead, Randy.
City of Prospect, ordinance number 590, series 2020. An ordinance amending and modifying chapter 31.21 A to F of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Prospect, indicating the Prospect mayor's executive position is full-time and is compensated commensurately.
Okay, that takes care of that one. And let's see, other than 591 and 592, there is 596, which is the one having to do with the fences. So why don't we see if we can grapple with that? Somebody want to make a motion to bring that on the floor?
I move that it be ordinance 596 be brought to the floor for first reading.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so be it.
Well, no, wait, we didn't discuss that. I am not ready to vote for this to go forward to a first reading, partly in regard to our speaker, in regard to boundary fences and everything. I think there are components of this. I love the new format. I think it's terrific. But there are components of this which I think are very real issues. I think that a fence is not a freestanding wall, and I don't think we can call it that when Webster doesn't. I think that there are areas where, for example, this restricts the decision-making on the process to the code enforcement officer. I don't think we can turn to residents and say, I'm sorry, you can't have a permit because he's on vacation or sick. I think that there are areas where this needs to have more work done on it. You can't, according to this, you can't have a brown fence because brown is not in the colors. There are, none of these I think are substantive, but I think they all add up to the fact that it's not ready for a first reading.
This is Greg. I totally agree with Sandra. In fact, I'd like to ask the council, since this is a rather sudden change with regard to the nuisance clause and the heavy penalties, and since, as Don Grader pointed out earlier tonight, it's a very complicated issue with multiple unresolved issues. Who owns the fence, and so on and so forth. And who's going to say what is too far decayed and too far dilapidated? What is reasonable? There's a whole lot of questions that I have. And the fines are huge. At the highest level of fines, they could be $200,000 a year. So I think we ought to just step back and take a look at this. And I think we ought to allow the citizens of Prospect time to chime in on this very important proposal because it has financial implications. There's subdivisions that have boundary fences around them, just to mention a couple, Sutherland and Innisbrook. And then in Hunting Creek, there is a long fence along Hunting Creek Drive. So we have not just individuals, but we have entire subdivisions that are implicated here. If there's a problem and it's declared to be decayed or too far dilapidated and so on, the penalties are just really, really excessive. So I'm concerned about something that I read in the Kentucky Revised Statutes under 65.8808. It states that a legislative body may utilize code enforcement to enforce the ordinance, including nuisance ordinances. So this is a new thing for us, the nuisance part. And then in 65.8825, there is paragraph 3. It says, when authorized by ordinance, a code enforcement officer may, in lieu of immediately issuing a citation, give notice that a violation shall be remedied within a specific period of time. In other words, a little grace period there. So I think since this is such a sudden change and since the financial implication is so great, I'd like to just table this and give the citizens of Prospect time to chime in, give our city attorney time to think about this and guide us, and give us council members time to talk about it further. Thank you.
I'm on board with Greg
Me
and
too.
Sandra on this, particularly having heard Mr. Grader and John Clark tonight allude to it. There is a lot more to the fence issue here than I had realized at the time. I think there's some really good work that's gone into this, and I really like this format much, much better than what we had. I think it's much clearer, but I think it still needs a little more work before we actually bring it forward for a first reading.
I agree. I think one of the other areas that's been taken out of here is corner lots. And corner lots, as those of us who've been around for a long time, are unique. And we've had at least 2 major kerfuffles since I've been around, and I think we've got to think through the point. I don't think we can just remove it. I think what was there may not have been perfect, but we can't ignore the fact that those lots are unique.
All right, is the council unanimous that we should not give this a first reading tonight?
I've got a few more comments. Greg, you're aware that that penalty clause is exactly as it's currently stated in the ordinance, right? You're aware of that?
Can you say that again, Frank? I didn't catch everything.
The penalty clause has not been changed from the original that we were working with.
Correct. It has not been changed. However, since the nuisance clause has been added, that makes it significantly more important.
Okay. The other points, and I don't care whether we pass this tonight or not, but the other points are that the words dilapidation, deterioration, decay, or need of repair come directly out of Metro's ordinances.
I don't really, I don't mean this the way it's going to sound. I don't care where it comes from. To me, it means, it's just, who says it's too far decayed? You know, everything in this world has a lifespan, and so it could be argued. I know we have a wonderful code enforcement officer. We couldn't ask for anybody better, I don't think, than Mike. But we're writing an ordinance, or will possibly, for the future, and it's difficult. You don't know what one person's opinion of what decayed or dilapidated will be. As soon as you finish building something, it starts in a phase of decay. I know that's a bit of an exaggeration, but I don't think that is a clear definition of when something needs to be addressed. How far does it decay? How far does it go before something?
What would you suggest? What would you suggest?
I don't
Well,
know. I think it needs a definition, though.
Let me throw another fly into the ointment. The fence behind my house is Sutherland's. It goes all the way from River Road to Lakemore, around behind Lakemore, to the pond near the nursing home. That fence, at least behind me, by any standard, is decayed. How do we define that fence in order to meet this nuisance requirement? Every time it takes a jig or a jog, is that a new offense? Is that a new nuisance? I think there's more thinking that needs to go into this thing. Sutherland, depending on how this was read, could be in dreadful shape just because of that one clause.
Correct.
I also think that what Mr. Grader said, the determination of whose fence it is irrelevant to enforcement of the ordinance. We enforce it against the owner, whoever the owner is.
But I'm not sure that you always have a clear owner when you have a situation like Innisbrook. I think that the fences that have gone in since the establishment of Innisbrook are clear, but we don't know necessarily who put them in before that. And I think that's what he's talking about.
Well, they're on somebody's property.
That isn't clear either. As we've noticed, as we've looked at the breakers, some of those fences may not have been there in the same location for the last 50 years. They may have been changed.
Let's go back to something Sandra said. Defining it, I think, is important because actually, I think we're subjecting ourselves, the city rather, to potential lawsuits because of the fines here, which could add up to a heck of a lot of money. In some of these situations where you have border fences going completely around subdivisions or completely up a very long stretch of Hunting Creek Drive. So I'd rather give this some time and give all of us a chance to look at it more and give our city attorney time to look at it more and give our citizens a chance to chime in more. It wouldn't hurt. We're not in a big hurry to do this tonight.
Well, it comes back to my question. Is the council now unanimous that this not be given a first reading?
I'm sorry, John, you faded out on me there. Can you?
asking whether the council is unanimous that we not give this a first reading tonight.
I don't think we're unanimous, but we may be,
Who
Aye.
objects?
right.
Objects?
I object to moving forward tonight. I'd like to hold it until we've done more work on it.
Understand?
Okay, so we're gonna defer it.
Do we need to take a vote on that, John?
I was just gonna say, if you want to vote on it, put up somebody make
No.
a motion that we do or do not give it a first reading.
I move that, well, let's see. We have a motion on the floor for a first reading, right?
Yes.
And it was tied, wasn't it? Because I didn't vote in favor.
Well, I didn't
No.
either.
Sandra,
It
Well,
was, it's
neither
on
did
the floor
Greg.
for discussion.
Yeah, it was
Now
on the
there's a
floor
vote-
for
Now there's a
discussion.
vote to bring it to the first reading.
I haven't heard of motion either way, so somebody make a motion either
I
that we
make a-
do or do not. Either that we
I
do
make a
or do
motion
not.
that we table this proposal.
second,
Moved and seconded that you table the proposal. All in favor, say aye.
aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. The motion is, the reading of the ordinance is tabled. So knock down everything except the two budget ordinances. And I would entertain somebody making a motion to bring that on the floor for discussion.
I'm not sure we're ready for a first reading. I think we are ready for a study session.
Okay, nobody wants to make a motion to bring it on the floor for discussion, and that's the end of that.
What about the road aid fund?
No,
That-
no.
I'm sorry, because of the background noise, I didn't hear you, John. I'm sorry, can you repeat that again for me?
I'm just trying to clarify the situation. It's my understanding, I'm hearing a sentiment that the council does not want to bring either the budget ordinance or the road aid budget ordinance on the floor for discussion tonight.
No, we want a study session. So yes, we're willing to discuss it, but we're not interested in a first reading.
Do you want that study session to occur on, before the world tonight, or do you want to do it otherwise? How do you want to do your?
I guess what's the other alternative? Expound for me.
I don't know. I mean, the study session was your all's term of art.
This,
I think we can
this is-
refer it to a committee. I mean, that's about the best we can do, a three-person committee.
Actually, I think having all of us be
Here,
here.
So
is
we
a-
hear the
yeah,
same thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, I do too. This is Greg. I just as soon get into a discussion of it. I mean, there's nothing in here that no one should know, and it's transparency, and so why not? And we're all here, and that's what we're supposed to do anyway. So I'd like to go on and get into it.
I'm with Greg. I think we have questions, and this is the best forum to ask them. So anybody else who is equally interested in it can hear the conversation and understand it. And then when we have a budget to vote on, hopefully the citizens will understand and be supportive of our action. Is that?
No, I think that's true. And I propose that we start with the income portion of the budget. And at least to start with, because the big important things are first, that we go through those. The difficulty is we're going to have to be asking Laura, who may not be here. So we need to make sure that she can hear us clearly.
I'm here.
Motion
I
for
hear you
discussion?
well.
Laura, you can hear us, can't you?
Yes, I can hear you. I'm right here.
Okay.
Laura, this is Frank. Do you have information or forecast information on what the final 19/20. Actual expenditures will be, I mean, we have a budget and we have year-to-date, but we're missing one little piece of information there. Do you have that information?
No, the information I sent out with the package, that is as current as what exists.
But you don't have any forecast or insight into what additional dollars we can expect in each category.
I don't have anything off the top of my head. I can say we have paid all of our major monthly bills, for June.
We're talking revenues now, just revenue.
You said spending, sorry. Revenue, the only major income we're expecting this month would be for ABC licenses, because they're all due by the end of the month.
Which one? Oh, okay, the ABCs, which only amount to a minimal amount of money anyway.
Right.
No big deal.
We won't start bringing in any more insurance premium tax revenue until July and August. Don't anticipate any additional property tax revenue. All the others, most of them are paid for the year.
So Laura, this is Greg. Just in round numbers, I'm not worried about the little dollars too much. Would you say we're going to be shy by about 90,000 on the income side?
I can't answer that question.
Roughly what is in to date?
You got the numbers on Friday.
3.284.
Right.
Yeah, but let's stay with property tax, okay?
Okay.
So that we don't mix everything. When I look at what is projected for next year, it looks like the property tax is going up. And yet, where did this number come from, the increased amount?
Which number?
$1,785,000. The property tax.
That's exactly the same as projected for this year.
Right. And does that feel that it is appropriate for this year? In other words, you just said no more is coming in, but we're at 1769.
Right. And next year's projection is based on the preliminary tax rolls we got from the county. So you add those two numbers in the notes column and you get almost 1.785 million. This year, I do not recall where that projection came from. I had thought it was a little high. You know, once you get to this point of the year, it's a matter of, do people pay off liens? Do more people apply for homestead exemptions and get reimbursed that way? If some people have paid twice, do they request refunds? That's what we're dealing with at this point in time.
So this amount is in the ballpark, but might be slightly high.
For this year, yes.
Right. Why do we not think that it will go down next year based on the pandemic?
Because that does not affect property values. Not at this point, not real estate property values. You know, that effect has been more on income.
Well, but it also, people are not buying houses at the same rate in some of the areas or as quickly as they were buying them before. Or some people may have been laid off and are defaulting on their mortgages. I mean, there really are some things in the mix that weren't there last year.
Laura, this is Frank. Isn't this based on the values this past January 1st? December 31st last year?
Yes, these are the preliminary numbers that we were sent by the PVA.
Okay. So the changes will have occurred last year is what our tax base is on.
as far as property values?
Yes.
Yes, for houses that were sold and refinanced.
But in 2019, that's our basis for tax, right?
Right.
For this coming budget year.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, to put this in a layman's terms for me, Laura. If somebody had a house that was valued for property tax purposes, say at $350,000 at the end of December, and then with the high unemployment, the number of businesses that have closed, the failure in the economy, the pandemic, all of that combined, somebody sells that house this year and only gets $300,000 for it. Do we then see that loss of $50,000 in both the property value of the house on which the property taxes are built, as well as our share of the insurance income on the homeowner's insurance? And so would we sustain that loss then when they paid the property tax bill this year?
If they sell their house at a loss after it's been assessed, that won't affect us this year. That won't show up until next year.
Right. Okay.
As far as the insurance premium tax, the best we can do with that is guess. And that's why the projection is lower for next year than it was for this year.
I was going to ask you that.
How did you come up with that number?
But that's a real-time number. That's on insurance this year, not, right? Correct? Each quarter or whatever it is.
Yes.
So they're two
We
different.
have nothing to base that on other past history and just kind of taking a look at current economic conditions. We're not given any figures to assist with the projection.
Yeah, I think it's probably prudent to be less because people are going to start reeling in some of their expenditures, and that's a place to look.
Have you gotten any guidance from the Kentucky League of Cities in what they might do with some of these things?
No.
I'm sorry, Laura, if you answered, I didn't hear you cut out.
I said no, I've not gotten anything from them.
Okay. Thank you.
Laura, moving to the bank deposit tax, could you explain exactly what that is and what mechanism there is for us knowing how to deal with it or what we can expect?
It operates the same as a property tax, and the banks, each bank within Prospect has to report their total deposits to the state on January 1st. And then the state sends us a report, a form showing what each of those banks reported, and we calculate the tax and print the tax bill based on what we get from the state. This year's revenue on that is unusually high, and that is because we believe they made an error in telling us what one of the banks had on deposit. I think it was, to be honest, I can't remember which one of the banks it was, but there was one where I had several conversations with them. They thought the state had placed their deposits as too high for Prospect, that it should have been for another municipality. But we had only what the state gave us to go on. So it's possible some of that 82,000 is going to have to be refunded at some point. But until the state tells me so, there it is.
This, you say it's like a property tax, so it's on the amount of deposits on January 1st of this year?
Yes.
Okay.
So people who had to use their retirement funds and their savings to eat, that won't hit us until next January?
Right.
So the second half of our fiscal year could look very different from the first half of our fiscal year. Because a lot of people have been out of work.
When do we get paid? When do we get paid this?
That's a good question.
We get those reports in the fall. Normally, the banks pay these bills in November, December
For the prior January?
for January of 2020.
Well, how did they know last fall what it was gonna be on January 1 of this year?
You've lost me.
Okay, the reason I'm confused is it says we had 76,000 in the budget this year. And then it says year to date, so we've gotten paid 82,672, but you're saying that's based upon January 1, 2020 deposits.
No, the 82,000 was based on January 1, 2019 deposits.
Okay.
Is there only one payment per year?
Yes,
Per bank or?
yes.
Okay.
And all banks are required to pay on the same date?
Well, they're given, when we get the information from the state, we generate the bills, send them to them, give them a 6-week deadline.
When do you receive? You say you receive them in August?
In the fall, and we usually receive payment in November and December.
So we've had this 82,000 in the bank for 7 months now, roughly.
It's at least the end of last year, yes.
Okay.
This one could be a disaster in the next fiscal year.
Utility tax is a big jump, and then another, a really significant.
That one, if you look at, go several columns to the left, 2017, where we only brought in 4,300. What happened is that year, we only get payments from 2 utilities, LG&E and Indiana Gas. That year, I believe it was Indiana Gas did not pay their tax, but we never received the information from the state. And so we never received their payment. It took them until this year to get caught up. That 18,000 is actually 2 payments from Indiana Gas and 1 from LG&E.
Is that, what is it, the rate based upon? Is it a stable rate or is it a percentage of something?
I don't know. We're just given a value from the state and the rate to bill them at, and that's what we generate the bills from.
Well, it pays to be on the good side of the state, doesn't it?
Actually, if you look at your utility bills, there's taxes all over.
That's for sure.
On the cable TV franchise fee, I remember us asking questions earlier about if there was a way that we would get more money for that if we collected it ourselves rather than having it pass through the state. Chris, I think maybe you did some research for us on that. Where are we on that?
Well, we just delayed it to whatever we're doing, and maybe it's time to revisit it.
I think it was November that we had to put them on notice or something like that. Does that ring a bell?
But you can always correct it. You can always correct it. I'll be glad to look at it again if that's what you want, Randy. No problem.
I'm just seeing that it's been such a steady 35, and I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity to capture more money if we were to take that on ourselves. Obviously, if it costs us more to collect it ourselves than to have somebody else do it, then it's
Actually, I looked into
Zero
that part
sum.
of it. I talked to, there's one, city attorney who all of his small cities collect their own. And one of my concerns was that it would come in trickling like the insurance tax. They don't, they get one check a year, and it really was no burden. In fact, when I asked questions of the clerk who got the check, because I thought she was gonna give me some, oh my goodness, it was nothing. And so Chris is right, we probably should take a look at that again. I think, Chris, when you looked at it before, it was $17,000.
That's what I recall. That's what my notes had from the prior discussion, was that's what basically, I think it's the state skims off the top and then sends the rest to us, so I'd rather skim the 17 for us than them.
Right, that's what I found out last time. I think that, I'm trying to think of the downside. I think the downside is once you opt out, you cannot opt back in, with the state, but if they're taking that much money from us, maybe we're better off not doing it through them. I'll be glad to look at it, and report to you at the next meeting.
Laura, that 33,000 then is just a number that we have to accept from the state. Correct?
Yes. Yeah, we've got one more payment due for June, so we will probably get 35,000 this year.
Okay. Thank you.
And since everybody's home watching television, this is one that won't go down a lot.
The CLEP grant, now the chief is here, why is that CLEP grant in the revenue column? Why isn't that in a restricted revenues? Why isn't that separate?
I can't answer that question. This is the way it's been done for as long as I know.
Why?
This is Greg. Since there's a bit of a lull, it's really good to me overall. I can see what you've done here, Laura. On the interest income, I think I see what's happened there, but so that 15K is what you think we'll have in next year?
I don't know. The way things are looking now, I think it's going to be a lot lower than that.
Well, let's stay with CLEP for a minute. Why wouldn't that be reasonable to include that in whatever line item in the police as a credit?
I don't know how they
The police chief is coming up to talk right now.
Okay. I don't know how the auditors list that, but basically it's a pass-through number that the state reimburses. Initially, it's paid out by Prospect. It's on a monthly check, and I think it's done quarterly. Is it not, Laura?
No, I think we still get it monthly.
I know that the officers get it monthly, but I didn't know how the state reimburses you.
Right. Yeah, I think it comes into our account every month.
Okay. All right, that's what they do then, but it's that total figure for a year per full-time officer, and then Prospect pays it out first, and then they're reimbursed on a regular basis by the state.
So it's really not a revenue, it's a reimbursement for
Correct.
something we've expended.
Correct.
So it probably doesn't
Yeah,
even
so
need.
I don't know how it's really done in the
Yeah.
budget. I think that's been
Well,
done
it's
that way.
right now it's shown as revenue. My question is why
It's
that
never been a revenue. It's basically always been.
why that
pass-through.
wouldn't be a credit to your department expense in your show as a credit to whatever line item you have there with.
Yeah, no, it's shown on ours, under ours, it turns out as a flat payout under ours, does it not, Laura? I don't have it.
Yeah, no, it does. It does.
Yeah, it shows as a regular flat payout.
And so
for us.
instead of putting it in our general revenues, it probably would make almost more sense to put it,
Have it in the
especially
police
since we're
budget.
getting
It
money
would
after.
even out. I mean, a payout and then
So that's right.
to go back in.
Yes.
Well, and if you had fewer
Well, it'd be a much more meaningful.
accurate, it would.
Yeah.
Because if you had somebody, if you had a vacant position, you wouldn't get it, right? You would have to
Correct.
have
It only,
somebody-
yeah, it only goes to.
Right.
Employee
So
while
this
they're
is
working
actually
for
a
that.
hypothetical number based on.
Yeah, there's times that we don't actually pay out full amount that we're budgeted for.
But we're showing
But
it,
then by the same token, they don't have to pay us the full amount. It always comes out to zero. It always
Right.
comes out to zero.
Right.
Prospect never pays out more than what.
but we look like we've got an income stream that's
You could probably
guaranteed.
just put it under one category and then when it pays out, and then it gets reimbursed. And it still all goes back to
Well,
zero.
yeah, I think it should be within your budget, just a credit. All of your debits, all your expenses, and then a revenue offset as you get it.
However you want to do it. Doesn't make any difference.
Well, I'm not.
Right now, it's in the salaries and benefits.
But it's
Yeah.
not, but it's not revenue. We're working with revenue right now.
It's not a revenue, I agree with you there.
So,
So if you want to take it out of there, that makes sense. And you could still just all leave it, as far as I'm concerned, I think you could all leave it under the one line and CLEP under our salaries and benefits. And then it's a reimbursement under that, and eventually that will go back to the zero.
Well, you have to carry both of them because you have to see. No, I guess you really don't, do you?
Not if it's a
No.
reimbursement.
Not if it's a reimbursement. I agree
well,
with you.
yeah, you should have the expense and then you should have the credit for the reimbursement. You should-
Okay,
you should
I-
show two
Yeah,
lines,
okay, I agree.
offset, so just for
Clarity.
You would
exposure
still,
or
you would
whatever.
still show us if you had 10 guys, it's 4,000. You would
Right.
still show the 40,000
Right.
as a payout, and at the end of it, you would show credits back of
Of
40,000.
40,000.
So the ending balance is still zero.
And if the state withheld money, then we'd have something to, we need to, yeah, no, I agree with Frank.
All right, there you go.
Okay.
Laura, can we implement that, or could you talk to the bookkeeper about how to implement?
I'll look into it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. What is base court revenue?
You don't sit down.
Base court revenue is when we get reimbursed for things, for example, citations, things like that, that the court, and we have no control over that. It's basically what they will send us back based on things that, revenue that's generated from either citations or court costs, things like that. You get a very, very small percentage of stuff from court, and ours is very small.
Okay, for a $65 ticket. Out here, we issue $65 ticket.
There's no such thing as a $65
All
ticket.
right.
Court costs themselves are like $140. The actual ticket, like a speeding ticket, the actual ticket is only about $25 to $40. It's the court cost they get you.
Okay,
And that's where a part of that goes out. There's a percentage of it that goes to the state administrative officers, office of the court. There's a percentage of it goes to the county attorney's office. And then there's a really small percentage of it that goes back to an issuing agency. It's pretty small.
but do our officers have to go downtown?
If they're subpoenaed for court, yes. You know, they've really cut back on the number of court appearances that they have. At one time, if you say, for example, you had an arrest where you had 2 or 3 officers involved, all 3 of them would go to court. But over the years, they've cut back on that, where you would just have what they consider as a primary officer. And then if it got really, the case advanced pretty far into court, where they determined that all 3 officers may be needed for a trial, at that point, in that appearance, all 3 of them would come to court.
That's not for traffic citations.
No. And in fact, like a first appearance now, they don't even subpoena the officer like they used to. Now, you're probably not going to go until it's maybe the 3rd appearance for the person that received the citation.
So this is really coin toss of how much we get.
Yeah, it's pretty much a coin toss. Now, if you wrote a great number of tickets, you would get a higher number, but it still doesn't move the needle much at all.
Have you done as much during the last few months with the pandemic as you did before?
No, because actually traffic's really low. Our traffic accidents have reduced greatly during all this because there's not nearly as many cars out. I mean,
So-
you can tell at 4 o'clock just turning out of the building to leave. It's much easier to cross 42 now than it has been in a long time. It's a lot easier to get around.
So if we're projecting a similar amount to what was last year, that probably is too high.
It's probably a reasonable number. Again, that needle doesn't move much based on tickets. We don't write a whole bunch of them to begin with. I would say that number is going to be fairly consistent.
So where?
Even if you've done, I'm confused, because if you've done way fewer, how
It's
can?
not way fewer, but there's not a big number. To begin with.
Not a large number to begin with.
So you've looked at this, you think this, this year and next year approximately going to be the same?
Yeah, the court figure doesn't move a lot for us.
Okay.
I'll wait for the next one.
Business licenses.
Fingerprinting. Well, hey, while you're up there, Chief.
Yeah.
Let's go to fingerprinting.
Okay.
You got $1,000 here for next year, 1,100 or 1,200 this year. What is that?
That's just a projection on the number of fingerprints that Jill gets, that the people that come in to get it. If you're like nurses are all fingerprinted, attorneys are fingerprinted. These are people that are graduating from the schools.
Teachers.
To be teachers. If you're going to be licensed in the state of Kentucky, you have to be fingerprinted. And so a lot of the ones that we do are actually Prospect residents. We do those for free. If you live in the city limits of Prospect and you need fingerprints, we do those for free. The ones that we charge are the ones that live on the outskirts, and we charge a $20 fee. That's pretty commensurate with what anybody else does, like St. Matthews does them. They do them over in LaGrange, they do them in Oldham County. Almost everybody does it, and they all charge a fee on it. I think we're the only ones that really don't charge for our residents, but in the scheme of things, it doesn't take a great deal of time to do it, so it's a pretty good service for them. They all seem to be pretty appreciative of it.
Yeah, that's great.
And what was the fee?
The fee,
How much was it? 20?
$20.
So that's you do about one a week based on $1,000. It's $20.
Yeah, one of the paid ones per week.
Which one paid me per
Yeah,
week?
and but she'll do for every paid one, she'll do 2 or 3 of the residents. And we have a lot of nursing students in here, it seems like.
Yeah, you really do. Most Thursdays when I'm in here,
Yeah.
there is at least one.
Yeah, and it's really picking up with like Galen College.
Mhm.
Yeah, we get a lot of them.
Thank you.
Shall we go back to business licenses?
So how much risk do we think we have in this revenue estimate for 2021? 3.41.
What?
How much risk do we think we have in that number? Based on the discussion we had.
What number? What number?
Which one?
The total budget, the total revenue for 2021, $3,411,900.
Well, I think we need to finish before we can answer that question.
Yeah, I'm learning a lot, actually. So,
Laura, I have a question about the ABC licenses. I mean, because of the COVID, we were hit that severe, that we only got 1,800 so far. Out of the budget is 6,500.
Right. Mike Lesh is really the person who can answer that question because he's the one who processes them. June is the payment month, so we've still got another 2 weeks. And same
Okay.
as with business licenses, they all come in at the last minute.
Okay.
What are ABC licenses?
Liquor licenses.
But that's not
Beverage
like
control.
sales. That's not
It's restaurants and
tax or anything on sales. That's just the permit for
yes,
the business.
yes,
And those are issued once a year, correct?
yes.
Okay, so we should expect that to go up quite a bit.
Is it fixed or is it based upon some percentage of sales or something?
It's based on the type of license you're getting. Whether you're getting a retail license or, what is it, a malt license? I don't know what the different categories are, but there's multiple types of licenses. And it all depends on how you're dispensing it.
Do all businesses only get one license, or does a single business who does multiple kinds of things get multiple licenses?
Yes, some businesses will get multiple licenses depending on what they're doing.
Oh, that's right, Bistro 42 and the Chinese restaurant. Yeah.
So we'll probably get that.
So the reduced forecast, is it sufficient? I think we're gonna, is it enough of a reduction?
Well, it sounds like the ABC one would go down,
Everybody's drinking at home.
but the business licenses, it looks like she's already reduced those.
Yeah.
But it looks
Yeah, but
like the
I would think the
ABC.
ABC would go down because they said we've already identified 2 restaurants, Bistro 42 and Chinese. So I would tend to think that will go down. Bistro 42,
They're actually, they're reopening.
Are they really?
Yeah, Mike's been dealing with them.
Ah,
okay,
interesting.
good news.
I thought I saw a sign that it was a different business going in there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But still with
They
liquor, oh,
probably
that's
will.
good, okay, all right. Okay. On permits 4303. I noticed that we budgeted 5,000, we have 8,000, and we're budgeting 5,000 again. Is the 8,000 bump up from, related to what's going on at the Breakers and Hunting Green, or is that something else?
It's a combination of the two. I don't think Mike has seen much activity related to Hunting Green. While people have been stuck at home, they've been replacing their fences, putting in pools, things like that. So we've had a good year for permits.
So it's not new construction, it's basically repairs, huh?
Most of it is. There is some new construction. I believe there've been 1 or 2 new houses going up, not related to those subdivisions.
Okay.
Wouldn't it make sense, and maybe not because you haven't increased it, but if we budgeted 5 and it went up to 8,000, and then we still have work going on at the Breakers, that 5,000 might not be larger?
That's just very hard to predict because we don't know when they're going to be ready to start building houses there. We don't know if a lingering recession is going to impact that. $5,000 is a safe number.
I'd be more comfortable leaving it at 5.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Especially because some of the other ones could go down a little bit. So I think that's very realistic, Laura.
Such as the next line, reduced in half.
Yeah. What's the interest income? It's interest on our bank accounts?
Yeah, on the money in our bank accounts. And I was telling Greg, I'm thinking I may have been too optimistic about the 15,000 because what we brought in the past couple months has been abysmal.
Which it used to be in the old days. I mean, if we go back to 15, 16, what do you think it ought to be? 10,000?
I'd say 10.
Okay.
You know, if the Fed raises the interest rate again, we might start bringing some money back.
Is any of that interest on the money we have set aside for road funds or the
Right, the restricted fund account, which is where the municipal road aid goes, that has its own interest and that feeds right back into that same account. This is only the interest on our cash accounts.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, if you want to change it to 10,000, it looks like most of us agree. In terms of community events contributions, are we no longer asking local businesses to help us with
We did
4th of
not
July?
this year because of the current situation. I knew they were hurting. I just couldn't ask them for money. And this was before we'd even decided to cancel July 4th.
Well, but even last year, I mean, compared to what it used to be, it's been pretty low for a long
Right,
time.
we're still soliciting, but fewer and fewer of them are contributing. And it used to be Kroger was a reliable contributor of a big amount, and they haven't given us anything for the past 2 or 3 years.
Okay. Somebody has a puppy.
I confess it's me.
Is that right?
So that's very conservative, would you say, Laura, 2,500?
It depends on what we're gonna be doing. Can't solicit funds just for the heck of it.
Yeah, I think that's realistic. I think that's a good placeholder. We can always do something if we have a different world in another few months. And the library income at 2,000 is realistic if we have 2 book sales. But if we only have 1 book sale, it should be 1,000. Because roughly we raise $1,000 per book sale is roughly what it is.
The question, if that income, why is it going into the general fund? Why isn't it the same type of thing as cleft? When you offset
Because you only
library
have 2
expenses?
funds, general fund. voting fund.
It has to go into something in order to apply against the expense.
Right. Now, here's the deal. In the event, for the sake of argument, that I only raise $1,800, that I would spend $2,000. In other words, this isn't real money. It's a placeholder for what's going on. And then whatever I do raise is what I tend to spend. And that's how we buy bookshelves and CDs and all that kind of stuff.
So back here, you're gonna show you're gonna spend $2,000.
Probably.
So that offsets.
Mhm.
that-
Yeah, it does.
It's a wash.
It is a wash, but you've got to have a way of putting, when the dollars come in and they trickle, you've got to have a place to put it, and that's what this line item does.
Why couldn't you put them in the library line item is as a credit?
You could, but you have to show it as income because it is income. It's not a pass-through like what he's talking about.
This is Greg, everybody. Just to go back for community events just a second. I know this is 4 years away, but just maybe we could put something in the back of our minds. 4 years from now is our 50th anniversary as a city. And marketing a city is important. So there might be some things, maybe John, maybe we need a special planning committee in a year or 2 from now. But we could sort of build up to that. And then by the time our anniversary did roll around, that could be a significantly higher number. Just a thought.
Well, that's a great idea, and you just appointed yourself a member.
Zip.
Okay, we're at parks contributions.
I have a question here. I know we have the fundraiser in the fall for the parks. It shows $1,000 in the 1920 budget. It shows no money received. And that was in October, so we should have gotten money that we were promised from the profit from the run by now. And then we're forecasting 1,000 when we haven't even gotten anything yet.
Yeah, Linda Wardell has been working on them, has sent several emails to Zach Beaven to find out what's going on. Supposedly a check was mailed and never made it here. So, we're still waiting on that.
Would you know the amount?
1,000.
So
Did we get money last year?
Yeah, we've gotten it the previous 2 years that they held it. Just something happened this year, don't know what.
Well, because it shows that in 19, we didn't get anything.
It's actually, there is a restricted fund specifically for parks in the restricted fund. And then this year we decided to stop doing that and have
Oh,
it in the
okay.
general fund.
Okay, I got you now. I got you. You might follow up with them again though on the checks in the mail.
We just did that last week.
Actually, it's got to get here by the end of June.
Yeah.
Yeah, Linda knows.
Okay. Good luck. How much do we charge for tax record requests?
It's, if we receive a bulk request, they get the first 2 free. After that, it's $10 per parcel.
Well, you must get quite a few if you've already taken $3,000.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's good.
Who's requesting them?
Mortgage processors, banks.
Oh, okay, okay.
Laura, what is the LGEA grant?
Local
Not worth much.
something assistance. It's not something we've gotten money from for years, but just on the off chance it shows up again, we keep the line there.
Okay.
We'll take any money somebody wants to give us, right?
Yes.
Depends on the conditions.
Oh, well, I guess that's true. In regard to the rollover committed to paving, not tonight, but before our next meeting, here's my question. How do I look at the money that has gone into the road aid fund and the general fund and keep the amounts separate so that we're not commingling? And just a review of the last, 3 years of each of those funds and the money that went in and the money that went out would help. Because then I can look at this 173,000 with a greater degree of intelligence.
And I don't know how does that, yeah, go ahead.
Most of the money we've spent out of municipal road aid has been spent on snow removal, and salt. Do you want those figures as well?
Yeah, and if anything you can give us that will show what you took out of where. So, and part of what I'm dealing with in my own mind, which is totally confused, is how are we going to go forward with planning our paving for the future? And by looking at the last couple of years and how you isolated road aid fund from general fund, because I know you tend to do the road aid fund and you spend that first, which I absolutely agree with. It would really help just to look, and 3 years is more than enough.
Okay.
That's the ability to reconcile this number, those numbers, it's
important.
going to be a challenge.
Anyway, that is the end of revenue, right? And Randy will be home in time.
Give a shot.
And I honestly think it wouldn't hurt for us to consider another special meeting, just like this one, maybe in another week, to keep on going with the budget, unless somebody doesn't want to do that.
Laura's got 2 assignments now. We've asked her to look into the type of stuff.
So I wouldn't do it right away. I mean, I give her time.
And the road aid.
Right.
Those are the only things that we've asked for feedback on, right? Those 2.
Right, but she has another part of her job too, and I'm thinking if we did it a week from now, that would be
Don't
fine.
Overload the system.
Yep.
Would you want to set a date and time?
How's next Monday at 6?
As usual, I'm checking my calendar and let's see, I have nothing.
Next Monday at 6?
I can do next Monday at 6.
What date is that?
22nd, June 22nd.
You say 6 PM?
Yeah, that way we could get out early enough to eat.
Special meeting.
Yeah, if it's okay with everybody else.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought this was very productive for me.
I liked it a lot.
For me.
Would it be better to do it during business hours though, so Ron's available, or we're all gonna do it just like this?
No, that's a good
Well,
question.
it depends on how we go through this. The major components are, well, the police department would probably take a session just like this, so we understand the cost of the police department, because there's a lot of line items within there that we would like to understand.
What if we do administration and police, however much we do, next Monday? And I think your point's well taken. When we start looking at maintenance, we need to have Ron.
Yeah.
And we
Well,
have
and
to
also
do
to
it.
coordinate this too.
Yeah, yeah,
If everyone's not gonna be in person.
right. Okay.
So have we agreed on next Monday, June 22nd, 6 PM?
And we'll do administration and then start on the police.
Okay.
Is there a problem doing it during regular business hours, like say 2:00?
No, we'll worry about it after we find out how far we get through at the next one.
Well, he means the next one.
Well,
He was saying do the next one.
no,
at 2 o'clock.
yeah, let's do the administration first.
But
Oh,
he's
you're
talking about time. He's talking
Right.
about time.
Right,
2:00 versus 6:00.
okay with me. It's got the more-
Yeah, at
most
2:00 would be
strength.
much better for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
All
okay.
right.
I can.
Is that all right with you, Greg?
Yes, that's fine.
I can do 2.
Okay. 2:00.
Okay, Greg?
I'm playing golf.
Oh,
At
We'll make
Henry
it 3?
County,
What time will we go? Yeah, just.
3 o'clock would work.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
3,
3:00.
okay.
All right.
3 and not 2.
3. Yep.
So I have this at the right, so I show up at the right Monday, June 22nd, now at 3 o'clock
Yes.
to do police and general administration.
In the reverse order.
Do general administration and police, okay.
Right.
Okay.
That's what I wrote down.
Okay.
You're easy.
Sounds good.
Okay, you ready?
We adjourn.
Second.
Hello? You ready to adjourn?
We
Yes.
are.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
You're adjourned.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.